Hello and welcome to The Wave from Ocean Reef, a podcast about the flow of life today and how you and I might ride with or swim against it. I'm Dan Meyer, Chaplain-in-Residence at the beautiful Ocean Reef community in Key Largo, Florida, and here's The Wave for today. Sooner or later, all of us find ourselves in the presence of someone who is deeply hurting. They've been diagnosed with a terminal illness. They've lost a loved one to suicide, murder, or a tragic accident. Perhaps a baby has miscarried, or a child or sibling is disfigured or dead. Maybe someone's discovered that their spouse has been having an affair or has decided to leave them. What do you do or say in moments like these? Rendering appropriate care in times of crisis is a complex business. As a young pastor, I used to go into hospitals to see sick people, and I would come out feeling sick myself. Or I'd get close to grieving or dying people and found that it kicked up very uncomfortable feelings of sadness or fears about my own mortality. I hear of people in marital or parental crisis, and I often feel pangs of concern for my own family. Maybe that's why a lot of people resort to an approach to caregiving that is somewhat aimed at preserving their own emotional safety. While understandable, the chief problem with these strategies is that they sometimes actually hurt the people we intend to help. People in crisis repeatedly describe three particularly unhelpful behaviors that they meet in ostensible caregivers. And those behaviors are separation, superficiality, and spiritualizing. What hurts me most, one man with terminal cancer told me, is the separation from others. People avoid me now like I'm already dead. A man who'd been given notice that he was to be laid off from his company confided, "People I worked alongside for years avoid contact with me now. They won't even look me in the eye. It's like I'm a leper to them." A woman going through a divorce shared, "The friends we had as a couple no longer call me. You'd think that I'd divorce them." It's awful enough to have something or someone in your life die. But it's agony to be alive and yet separated from the living. Even when people aren't so consumed with their own safety that they stop coming around or calling, the conversations people often have with those in crisis are marked by a kind of superficiality too that can be wearying or wounding. A terminally ill man told me, "What exhausts me are the many repetitive surface conversations I have. I'm so tired of answering people's questions about my condition and the treatments I'm undergoing. It's like they weren't listening the first 10 times I explained it to them. Or then they just breeze on about sports or the weather. I'd actually like to talk about how I feel about dying, how unsure I am about what comes next, and about all the things I'm going to miss." Then there are people who preserve their personal sense of safety by spiritualizing suffering and loss. They'll say things like, "I guess God must have needed Joe more in heaven than right here," or "God must really have a lot of confidence in your faith to have you go through something like this." Or, "God never closes a door without opening a window someplace." Have you ever heard people say this sort of thing? If we want to offer meaningful help to those in crisis, then we have to be open to feeling the hurt, doubt, and vulnerability of suffering in ourselves. We need to push past the temptation to separate ourselves or remain on the superficial level or spiritualize everything. Over many years of being with suffering people, I've stumbled across 3 questions that seem to be particularly helpful. First, consider asking, what feels especially wrong or evil about your situation. People in pain need permission to talk openly about their experience of darkness, even if it doesn't feel safe. A little boy was late in coming home from school one day. "What in the world were you doing all this time?" his worried mom demanded. "I met a kid whose books got dumped on the ground by some bullies," he explained. "And it took you that long to help him pick the books up?" she asked. "No," the boy said, "but it took a while to cry with him." We can't always pick up all the pieces that sin and death shatter in this life, but we can always assure people that they are not alone in the ruins. A second question to ask someone in crisis is, where are you seeing any good? A dear friend of mine passed away after a 3-year battle with a rare blood disease. One of the things he most enjoyed talking about was what he called the ironic grace he'd experienced through his illness. He would choke up as he spoke of the deeper bond he'd found with his wife, the greater pleasure he took in simple things he'd always taken for granted, and the hope he now found in the promises of God, even though he frankly struggled to trust them entirely at times. Time and again, I've heard from people whose life has come unraveled how much small acts of practical hospitality have meant to them. They'll talk about the person who left a casserole by their door or who sent over a restaurant gift certificate. They marvel over the kindness of the person who offered to babysit so that they could get away for an evening or a weekend and just think through their circumstances. They rejoice over the person who invited them out for coffee and just listened without giving advice or helped them think through their options and their next steps. It must be said, however, that sometimes people in crisis need just the opposite of our presence. They may need margin and quiet more than anything else. That's especially true, I think, at the very end of life. When someone feels so ugly or out of control or miserable, they may not really need us to stop by. Their family may not need us to be calling or interrupting their last precious days, even if it would make us feel like we've done something. Instead, we can write a note. We can leave a casserole at the door without ringing the bell. We can call them a month or two after the funeral when they'll really need a friend. The number one mistake I think we often make when it comes to caring for people in crisis is that we do what makes us feel better instead of honoring what makes them feel better. Sometimes the only way to know someone's need is to simply ask, what would feel to you like help right now? And then honor that, even if our impulse would be to do something else. So here are the questions. What feels especially wrong or evil about your situation? Where are you seeing any good? And what would feel to you like real help right now? These are some of the ways that we can seek to help without hurting. That's today's Wave from Ocean Reef. If you know of others who might appreciate this sort of content, I hope you'll pass it along or encourage them to find me on Spotify, Apple, or other podcast outlets. Until next time, I'm Dan Meyer, hoping that the flow of life is good for you.